Hello. So I wanted to share with you a guide that I made on creating essentially a heat-proof base for things like ceramics, and also it makes it non-slip as well by adding Sugru to it. So this, for example, is on the bottom here of this mug, and as you can see from the rather grotty interior, it's been well used and, should we say, well tested. So I can say with some certainty it hasn't just fallen off or anything. But I guess the main reason I really liked this was that it stopped it skidding around when it was on the table in the workshop, and also if you actually happen to have a sort of fancy wooden table, this is a really good insulator, and so it stops it leaving those white marks burnt into the varnish on the table. Although I offer no guarantees for your antique furniture, but either way, definitely stops it skidding around. And one of the things I was kind of proud of is that I ended up in this ceramics review, and it actually has a kind of cool flip it upside down thing going on. And so this is it in the technical ceramics, and it got featured as a way to create funky bases to pots. But also, as I said, the functional side of things of how to attach it as a sort of insulator for heat, and also as a non-slip thing. And also, I think, if we're honest, a lot of ceramicists, and I'd done this for sort of 6 years quite seriously before I got into product design, it's actually quite common that the base of the ceramics has a little bit of wobble in it. So again, the ability to sort of buff in a very perfect, pad of something that can't be easily seen when on display is actually a bit of an asset to ceramics. So as much as people like the slight lack of precision in the rim or the handles or any of those sorts of things because it gives it that human touch, actually having something that's a little bit wobbly or unstable isn't quite so satisfying. So I think, whether you go from a decorative, functional angle, it's an interesting thing. So I hope this is useful, and maybe gives you a bit of a left field take on how you can combine materials in non-traditional ways. So anyway, without further ado, if you're not familiar with this website, Instructables.com, I think it's a really great website for exploring and discovering, as well as sharing things to do with making and hacking and things like this. So anyway, this was the process that I went through. And if feel free to skip through the video if you already know how to make a pot. But if not, and you're curious about how you actually sort of start to combine these two things, then this is a really good primer. So you end up taking your thrown form, which is, if you like, the main bit of the pot, not worrying about the handle. And what I did in the base, when you flip it upside down, when it's what's called leather hard, I took a tool and scribed into it to make this little rim inside. And that was a way that if you looked at it, it wasn't just cut in like that. It was actually cut in and then, if you like, fanned out inside. And what that would do is allow the putty to go into it and then key into place. Now, this was me being, should we say, the engineer part of my brain, thinking, how do I make sure this definitely doesn't come out? I would say, in all honesty, I've since tried it not doing that, and the adhesion of Sugru is really quite good. So as long as the surface is reasonably rough, it's actually a very good adhesive to ceramics. So yeah, this has been kicking around for some time and is all good. So anyway, that was the process. I applied the handles in the usual way of sort of cross-hatching, applying a bit of slip, and then fixing them onto the side, finishing them off with various sort of tools. This one's called a kidney, which is basically just a little bit of metal to smooth it out. And again, I made all sorts of different variations, and you can see here what I've actually done is sort of cut channels into the handles, and I've put little inset rims here and here just to play around with different ideas. And so I think that's one of the nice things about combining different materials is you always go through this process of exploration and seeing how they perform together. So again, once I got to the position of sort of actually glazing the cups, again, I was sort of keen to try and make sure that I removed some of the glaze on places where I thought the Sugru would be worth sticking into. So again, this is all a little bit down to you. And again, preparation of the base makes sense to obviously clean things, make sure there's no debris, but this was also using it as a sort of polishing gel, if you like, combination of water and just a bit of hand soap. So after I'd cleaned it all up and dug out anything with that little bit of a coffee stirrer, basically squished together the moldable glue, rolled it into a little sausage, and then began packing it in all the way around the rim. And as you can see, being quite coarse about it, just to really get it in there before, in the later stages, starting to sort of realize that I'm going to buff it into shape. And as I said, using this little combination of a little squirt of the soap in a little bit of water, and then this is just a little sheet of plastic, and going round in circles to basically buff this flat. And so then afterwards, what's great about that is while it's still wet, going around with a scalpel, trimming it off, trimming off the interior as well, and then using just, this is again a coffee stirrer, a little wooden stick, just to scoop it out in line with the rim that I had already incised. And then that left a really nice finish. And what's good is you actually end up having quite a bit of excess, and you could go use that for all manner of affixes. So check out either other stuff on Instructables, or indeed Sugru.com for some ideas. So, as I said, this was an example of the white marks I was trying to avoid. Though not the end of the world, a bit of a first world problem. But nonetheless, I thought it was just also a nice way of, dare I say, adding a little bit of an unusual twist to what is a very plain, quite subtle white bowl. And I kind of wanted the base just to be that little bit more unusual, so that when you pick it up, it's very distinct. And I guess if one was wanting to write any sort of pretentious art speak narratives about, how something isn't always seen until it's interacted with, you could go ahead and do that. But I just wanted to make a funky colour, and that it kind of surprised people when they picked it up. And again, I think there's something rather nice about, rubber isn't usually considered something that has a very fine finish, but actually you can buff this into a really smooth finish, which is kind of nice. And again, by playing with the drying process, I was able to pack in, say, some black Sugru into this, and then pattern it by basically working it with a tool, let it dry overnight, and then use a different colour to basically pack into the detail, so that you get this sort of textured combination of the two different colours. And I think in some ways this is sort of, it speaks a little bit to sort of textile processes like batik and wax resisting, of the way you layer in different colours. For example, you could then still go in and put detail into these grey components of the design, let that dry, and then put in a third colour. So it really is just a little bit how intricate do you want to get. And dare I say it, if you're doing it on a batch process, say you've got 10 or 20 of these, you could actually get something incredibly intricate, which is just, by being organised, you can go through it sequentially. So I thought this was really fun. I did a whole bunch of other experiments, also sort of putting in some what's called thermochromic pigment, which, as the name suggests, thermo, heat, and chromic as in change of colour. And so this was something that changed temperature when you sort of put hot water in it, or in this case I was shooting a hairdryer at it from the side. Again, I think it's just nice to sort of play with all sorts of different designs. And as you can see, these would change colour as if there was a huge need in the world to tell you that as soon as this was getting a little bit more orange, it was telling you that your cup of tea was getting cold. But when it was hot, that probably would have been yellow. So again, just playing around with some different ideas. And as I said, hope that's fun and hope it's useful. And it was kind of nice. I think Instructables is a really great place in that it actually got second prize in a clay contest. So again, I think it's a nice guide, but also it's a really great community on Instructables. So even though this isn't endorsed or paid, I would just honestly recommend it. It's a lot of fun. Okay, thanks a lot. Bye.